Hello and welcome to another episode of the Man on Second podcast. My name is Eric Wiedeke, and I am joined today in emergency fashion by one Joe Frisaro. Funny thing happened over the last 24 hours. It looks like we are going to get baseball.
Yeah, right when Eric, we got to be excited, right? I mean, it's a big day. As frustrating as it was yesterday about this time, the elation is there that the baseball is back. CBA, new collective bargaining agreement, has been ratified. It is official. The 2022 season is going to kick off. And, I was almost going to tell you, we're not podcasting this week, Eric. I'm going out of town for the weekend. But this has brought us to the table, brought us to the podcast. Before we really dig in, we're going to obviously do our little promo for our dugout mugs, which now, when we go to spring training, when we go to games or we're tailgating or watching from home, we got our really good dugout mugs. Great product. Eric's put on the bottom there, dugoutmugs.com/man on 2ND. Go on to that site, order your dugout mugs now. Hey, these things really keep those drinks really cold too. I bring it outside while I barbecue. I'm sitting there in the heat, and it keeps that ice in there, keeps the refreshment nice and cold. So go out, get your dugout mugs now. They're in aluminum bats. They're in wood. They got wine glass type of them as well. Shot glasses. They got the whole works. Check out dugout mugs. And check out what we got coming at Man on Second, Eric, because now it's going to get real exciting for us because we're going to have a lot more content. We're going to really tap into your strengths and all of our strengths and really kind of grow what we're going to do. But we needed this hurdle to clear, and we're very excited. We're excited to be with part of 5 Reasons and catch us on the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel, the Man on Second Twitter account where these podcasts will stream, the website manonsecondbaseball.com. We'll start getting a lot more active as I'll add to that. And we got some fun times ahead. What are you most excited about, Eric?
Man, everything is just, it's going to sound a little hypocritical here because I was complaining about the lockout, how long it was, but everything's going to be so condensed now. And I know logistically for teams it's going to be difficult, but as a fan, as somebody that wants to sit and get hit all at once with all the baseball content I can get, that's what's most exciting for me is how intense this short burst is going to be.
Oh, it's going to be wild. I mean, what is opening day? I believe April 7th
Yes.
is opening day. I was up in Jupiter Day, so forgive me. I haven't even looked to see where the Marlins are in their schedule for that. If you can call that up.
April 8th at San Francisco.
April 8th at San Francisco be opening day now, tentatively, and hopefully soon officially. That'll be a first. That'll be a first going over there to open that San Fran. But it looks like they're going to make up the games that are lost. And, this was 99 days that since the lockout began. And as frustrating as we said, I think what really salvages it for me, Eric, is the commissioner for all the shots he's taken, rightfully or wrongfully. He's going to have a 162 game season. And yes, they're going to scramble to make up the 2 or the 4 series that were either canceled or pushed aside. But I guess now it's just 6 games after they went back to April 6th, 7th or 8th. And to have the 162 is huge. It's huge. And we'll probably quickly transition. There's not going to be a lot of time to lick our wounds for the fans. But, let's dive in. I mean, who do you think the winners and losers were in this?
I actually, crazy enough, and I think that this kind of what I said a little earlier leads into my main takeaway here. And, I had this thought as the deal was getting done, and it was, as much as we've kind of talked about, oh man, this lockout is hurting the league, and the casual fans are going to tune out. I think having this last second save, followed by what's inevitably going to be a flurry of transactions and player movement, I think that's actually really well timed for the league because all of this stuff is going to be happening while the most eyes are on it. And that's something that I couldn't have envisioned myself saying a week ago. But having this kind of last second save, I think does wonders for the league. I think the players got a pretty good deal as well. They came down on the arbitration pool money, but they got what they wanted from the CBT and then some. Um, the minimum salary being bumped up is going to be big. And then, from the fan perspective, call me crazy. I think some of the changes to the game are going to maybe increase the appeal to the casual fan. You're going to see a lot more offense, the universal DH being implemented, the shift being banned. Those are going to be interesting things to see how they kind of get implemented. But I think for people that are fans of offense, that's going to be a positive for them.
Well, I'm going to clear up right away because I see people are saying now the man on second in extra innings is going to be lifted, but the man on second is still here. Our podcast is here. The man on second has always been a metaphor for me as I kind of did this as someone who retired but wasn't completely at the end of the game. And so man on second is around. It's just in extra innings. So I'm not going to say man on second was a loser in this because we're off the board, because I think this is going to be the birth of something really fun. The particulars. So people, 5 years is CBA. So 5 years from now, we'll have this nonsense all over again. And we'll be, hearing about Bruce Meyer and Dan Hallam, and we'll be saying how much we don't like the commissioner and the players don't like these guys. And so 5 years of this. Big changes that Eric noted. The pre-arbitration bonus pool never happened before. 50 million goes to that. Great win for the players, in my opinion. Minimum salary over the 5 years, 700,000 this year, 720, and then it goes up 20 all the way to year 5 to 780. So players, the younger players, clearly winners. Competitive balance tax, as you noted, went from 220, 230 now up to the life of the contract will max at 244. Big win for the players, big win for big market teams as well. Draft lottery, top 6 picks. So the anti-tanking sentiment that's in there. If you finish with the worst record, you still aren't guaranteed. You're one of 6 who has a shot at the first pick. And obviously, universal DH is in. No more pitchers hitting. So I guess we have to look up who got the last hit by a pitcher as a Marlin, who got the last hit by a pitcher, period. That's all fun. Amateur draft, 20 rounds. That's already been, but that stays. International draft, and then the no compensatory draft pick attached to it was a trade-off. That's still in its formative stages. That's some of the big highlights. My winners, players clearly winners. Players clearly winners. Great deal for them. Credit to them. As frustrating as hardline as they were, it paid off for them. My hat's off to them. They did really well to represent their union very well. They got the attention of the league. They got the league to move on the competitive balance tax a lot more than I thought they would. The pre-arb pool, huge win for them among those things. So great job by the players. Owners win in the fact that they preserve free agency at 6 years, arbitration at 3 years. They basically retaining all those streaming. They're not, necessarily, their revenue streams have increased, the new Apple TV streaming deal that they're getting. So the owners are winning. The fans lost, but now have a chance to win based on, we lost because as fans, we had our hearts taken out of us for way too long. And spring training, the spring training sites, even with it coming back, it's abbreviated. So it's a loss for the fans and those spring training markets. Although, like you noted, some of these changes that are going to be evolving through the years should make the quality of the sport better. So those are kind of my thoughts. And I thought small market teams lost too, in the fact that it's going to be harder for the Marlins and the Rays to keep up with the Mets. But we'll dig more into that. Those are just some of my quick thoughts as we kind of navigate through this. How do you think it's going to affect the Marlins and the Rays? We'll talk about those.
I think, it's going to make it harder to be sustainable, perhaps. Given the fact that they will have to navigate having a healthier payroll, and the fact that other teams around the league, obviously like the Mets, like the Phillies, are going to be spending. But realistically, I mean, you look at what's going on right now in the league, and I don't know how much more. I mean, I don't want to tempt the Mets or the Dodgers or whoever to keep spending more money. Um, but I do wonder, how much more are they actually going to spend than they are right now? And I know that that Steve Cohen's pockets are as deep as Mariana's Trench or whatever, but I do question that. And then from the perspective of, and this is something that we didn't touch on, this is a major thing as well. There is the additional two playoff spots.
Oh yes, the
So we
expanded
are
playoffs.
we are expanding
Yes.
the playoffs. So I think from that perspective, that's kind of a little bit of a give and take as far as the competitive aspect goes. A little bit easier to make the playoffs. Maybe there's more, but there's less overall competitive balance throughout the league in terms of players that are moving around. But you look at what the Rays do and what the Marlins ultimately want to do. And as you said, big win for the owners was keeping the 3 years arbitration, 6 years to free agency. That's really how the Rays and the Marlins win if they're going to be sustainable. Sure, they'll add the occasional free agent, but the way that you win as a small market team doesn't really fundamentally change with this.
Yeah, I'm going to say, why I think it's harder on the Marlins and the Rays, um, because of what you said. The Marlins are counting on the Jazz Chisholms, the Trevor Rogers, Jesus Sanchez's, these guys who are, rookies are now going into their second year, that those guys now go from 560 to 700,000. So you add a few more of those guys. Now it could be like 10 to 15 of your players are going to have basically like a 30% pay raise. So it's going to make it. Let's say you want to say, oh, we're going to spend 120 million this year. That's our budget. Well, you're now spending more to retain those players that you already had. So instead of getting a free, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying now it's going to be more, and I'm happy for those guys. It's going to cost the Marlins more to improve the roster. And the Marlins have to be a team that can't make mistakes on free agents. Wei and Chen mistake. We saw, even Corey Dickerson was an $18 million mistake, even though it wasn't a ridiculous contract for the Marlins. That wasn't a win contract for them. They didn't get the return they thought. So all teams have those type of players, but the teams like the Mets, if they just mess up on one big contract, they just sign another big contract. And then if the next guy hits or two of the three hit, they're highly productive, high-end, impactful players. While for what the Marlins are doing, a little tougher. I thought one last thing on those smaller teams. It seemed to me this whole process is the Rays' blueprint for winning seemed to really be at the craw of the players, that they're winning on the cheap and then trading them when they're getting to be really good. And really, they're trading the players. The players they trade underperform. The players they acquire overperform, and it goes on and on and on. And then when we get down to the shifting, the Rays are at the forefront of that. If we go to robo-umps, which I didn't hear would be part of this, at least initially, the Rays were at the front line of framing with their catchers. Everything they've kind of done better than everybody. And now I personally think they're still going to be Studley. I think they're going to be really good and be a World Series contender for the next 3-4 years, even with this in mind. But it makes their task a little more challenging. But they are so well run. They have just an amazing plan, and they got amazing people, even as they sniper them off. But I think a lot of the CBA had like the Rays in mind. Like, hey, as I even saw Scott Boras was a guest on one of the podcasts. I'm not going to say who because I can't remember. It might have been one of the Athletics podcasts about, oh, yeah, everyone's talking about the Rays, but never won the World Series yet. Well, okay, well, the Dodgers hadn't won one since, 88, and they won in a 60-game season. It's like, you kind of took a little cheap shot at them. They got there, and they're getting to the play. They won 100 games last year. Winning it all is a totally different animal, But they're going to be fascinating. I think the Marlins will spend, as we kind of segue out of this, and we look more for the Marlins. I think the Marlins are going to spend. I think they're committed to the plan they had before Derek, parted ways, um, and I think they're going to make it interesting this year. But it's going to basically be they're going to be a draft develop, uh, use their inventory, their minor league inventory to acquire, big league players, and then do that very specific targeted free agent signing. And how do you kind of see the Marlins moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about the Marlins, and I don't want to I don't want to be too critical of previous front office regimes or what have you. But you mentioned things like Wei Yin Chen and Corey Dickerson. It feels to me like with this front office, there's a level of intentionality. I think that we haven't seen in quite a while because you know when the Marlins, let's use 2012 for example, right? It was exciting, it was fun, but you looked at it and when you held it up in the light, you said, "Well, how do these pieces really fit together?" You had
Yeah.
Jose Reyes and Hanley Ramirez, and you're trying to figure out, well, who's playing what position, and that's
Yes.
kind of a mess. But right now, I think what the Marlins are doing is a lot more smart. It is a lot smarter from the aspect of, okay, well, you acquire Joey Wendell. We know exactly the role that he's going to play. You acquire Jacob Stallings. He fills a big need. You extend Sandy Alcantara. So there's a level of, we
The
have a
process.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I
They're
and I
following.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think from there, you're going to see occasionally, like you said, free agent signings. As according to reports, they're not done yet. So we'll
Yeah.
see what else is to be done this offseason. Um, but generally speaking, I think over the next 3-4 years, I'm cautiously optimistic on the outlook.
Yeah, and I'm going to give two names that I heard today that are that to keep an eye on as they get into trade and free agent scenarios. Keep an eye on these are names I'm going to keep an eye on. Brian Reynolds. That's no surprise. His name has been linked to the Marlins for a while now. I think the Marlins will be engaged in conversations with the Pirates. They have in the past. Brian Reynolds is the type of guy is going to cost a lot. Who do you want to get? Where you want to lose Max Meyer, you want to lose JJ Bleday, and more. And another one is free agent Michael Conforto. I'm hearing that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's a likelihood. You're dealing with Scott Boras, and I'm sure his phone is ringing off the hook right now. I wish I could say with more confidence that they were going to be in on Nick Castellanos, which they had been for a while, but I'm not hearing his name mentioned right now. But I think, so if Castellanos isn't going to be coming here, which I still would hold out hope, but Michael Conforto, keep an eye to see if there's any traction there. He's going to have a big price tag. Remember, Tim Healy was on the podcast a couple of months ago, and he thought he could be $100 million player. Do the Marlins want to go there? Well, it seems like that's where we're going now. You're going to have to if
Yep.
you're going to be going to $100 million with players. He's young. Lefty power plays better at Lone Depot Park than right-handed power. Although I think Castellanos' overall ability to hit and his presence that he brings, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes somewhere like Philly. But keep that in mind. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be wild. Just keep this in mind too, Eric. I mean, I was just going down the roster. Um, who's the backup catcher? We got
Right.
Stallings. I guess is it Alex Jackson? Is
Oh,
it Nick Fortis? Is it before you always kind of knew you had the Jeff Mathises
right.
back there, and you always kind of had somebody to counter. And yes, you got Jacob Stallings, really good addition. But now who's that? You don't have Cervelli a few years ago, even though he got hurt. But you always kind of had that. Do you go with the more veteran backup catcher guy? Do you go with the kids? The first base, you got Aguilar and Garrett Cooper. Assuming one's going to be DHing, the other, it means Lewin Diaz maybe in AAA. Second base, Jazz. You got Miggy. You got the Wendell Brian Anderson thing at third base, which I wouldn't be shocked if Brian Anderson is potentially shot. But if he's healthy, also that's depth. That's a lot of platooning. You could go DH with one of those guys on occasions. Outfield, if you get Reynolds, let's say, you got him in center. You got Garcia in left, and Jesus Sanchez as of now, I would think in right. You can go and be a pretty interesting team with that lineup.
Yeah,
If it was to play off that way, or if Conforto signs instead of Reynolds, and you got a little bit different dynamic because center may not be as defined, but so that could be an interesting lineup. But we're going to see activity, obviously. From what I understand, the arbitration players, which Aguilar and Cooper are two of them. I guess Pablo Lopez is lumped in there, and many more. That there's ARB hearings are going to be later in the month, and the guy's going to report to camp. And I guess from what I heard on the radio earlier is on MLB Network Radio, I think it was Steve Phillips mentioned it. He mentioned something interesting on this. Now, in the hearing, ARB hearing, which are usually in January, the ARB numbers are exchanged. And then in February, they would be the hearings, or late January, early February, whatever. You would have the high number and the low number. The team's number would be the number the player would start the season with. So the player will not even know exactly what his salary is going to be until potentially, in some occasions, until basically close to, at least spring training, I should say,
right,
until getting fairly close to opening day. And there's like 120 or so ARB players. So there might be hearings going into the regular season. It could bleed into that just by sheer volume. So you literally could have, let's say, Aguilar sitting there, thinking he's offering, the club's offering $4 million. I'm just throwing these numbers out, and he's asking for $5 million. Well, one of those numbers, he'll start the year at $4 million, and if he wins the case, it'll be adjusted to $5 million. So that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
That these guys are going to have to pay. At least the first few weeks of spring training, they're not even going to know what their salaries are. That's wild. Rule 5 draft may be off the board. They may not have it this year. I think because of the scramble.
I believe it's confirmed to have been canceled.
Yeah. Okay. So that's off the board. And so these are, now it's just going to be a flood of players going to start coming in, presumably this weekend. The Marlins kind of told me to just kind of let them sort it out there, once they know details. But Saturday and Sunday, they're opening up minor league camp in Jupiter to the media and the fans. Fans are invited to come in. I don't know when the big league players will be there. I'll be guessing Sunday. But if you're in the Jupiter area, or you want to make the trip from Miami up there, Saturday and Sunday about 10 a.m. on those backfields at the Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium complex there. You could come watch the players. And I happened to be up there today, Eric, and saw J.J. Bleday hit a homer off Cade Cavalli, the really good pitching prospect of the Washington Nationals. Mm-hmm. And I saw Max Meyer, even though he wasn't as sharp as he can be. I sometimes like that because, when guys are throwing well, it's, okay, they could throw well.
Yeah.
It's how do you throw when you don't have your A stuff? But what I liked about Max is he didn't have his A stuff. I don't even know if he ever run, but he had a lot of traffic. He left a lot of pitches up. Wasn't, commanding as well. Throwing a lot more change-ups to work that in. Big pitch for him. But the ability to compete and get out of trouble is big for me as I watch these, especially the younger pitchers. Because if all you have is success, well, you're going to have a rude awakening in the big league.
Right.
Big leagues. But Marlins pitching development does such a good job. Scott Aldridge is a pitching coordinator there. And Tommy Phelps, a friend of mine, he was on the 03 Marlins. He's part of that crew, doing a great job, obviously, at the big league level. Mel Stottlemyre Jr. They do really good job working with these pitchers on pitching off their secondary stuff, not being afraid to throw it early in counts and changing speeds and being able to throw a changeup or a slider for strike one. Is really big. And so there's some fun stuff that I saw out there today. But I was keeping more of an eye on Bleday, more of an eye on Max. There are players all over there, but I kind of zero in on a couple of players and look to see how they're looking. And And the Nationals has some pretty good young players as well. Like I said, Cavalli is a kid. They're, Max and Cavalli are both throwing. I think they both touched 98 today, which you go back to me as someone who started being on those backfields in 2002, 2003. Pitchers, like Josh Beckett would come in throwing about 89, 91 and build velo up by the end of the opening day. They're throwing 96 and above. These guys are coming in, 3 weeks before the minor league season starts, and they're already humming 98,
Yep.
97. It's just a different type of training. They're just, they're built up differently. I always am concerned how they'll hold up, but that's a facet that I find pretty fascinating. But that's a quick report from Jupiter from me.
Interesting to see who. It'll be interesting to see who was watching that. I wonder if maybe one Pittsburgh Pirates had their eyes on what's going on over there.
Well, as of right
I'm
now,
sure teams have eyes in it.
Just so you know, because of the Rule 5 draft speculation, pro scouts were not being allowed on minor league complexes. So the scouts that were there were Marlins scouts and national scouts. People that are watching their own people. But now without the Rule 5 draft, yes, it'll be very interesting to see when the Pirate scouts show up, or whoever could be a target. But that's something in the next week. It's going to be a crash course. The other thing, a little concern is health of these players.
Yep.
The medical staff now can be working with these players. Guys coming off surgery or any type of ailments they were dealing with. They didn't have access to the medical staff from the teams, at least until now. So these are all things that it's going to be wild. It's going to be really wild.
Yeah, and just to touch on a few of those things, you kind of went through the entire roster there, and there's a lot to be done. It really highlights how much work there is to be done. You need another outfielder, like you said. You don't know who your closer is going to be, or what the back end of your bullpen is really going to be looking like. Backup catcher, first base. Personally, if it were up to me, I would rather shop maybe a guy like Cooper. But I know obviously that's kind of easier said than done. You got to account for who's got tangible value.
And you're dealing with a 3-week now rush.
Right.
So I think you're more inclined to keep your own inventory right now.
Right.
Unless something just was in early discussions from the GM meetings. Remember, they took place in November. So all that homework, but do plans change? Obviously budgets change. The certain markets, certain owners, they might be saying, hey, we have to spend more now, but where are we spending it? Are we going to spend, maybe we're out on, this player and going for 2 other players, that cost the same as the bigger ticket item. So it's going to be wild. Like I said, who knows, it's like November is a different world ago, for so many of these. So it's going to be in its own bizarre way, just the uniqueness and making it different will probably attract fans just from a curiosity standpoint, and get people back. How do you think players are going to be received? Do you think fans are going to be, booing guys? Do you think they'll be happy for guys? Or do you think, because I think the hardcore fan is right there anyway, and most of them sided with the players anyway, so they're not
right.
Coming
right. Yeah, I don't. I don't think we're going to see like a hugely negative reaction. I think, if anything, it might be quite the opposite, especially early on in the season at spring training, because people that are going to spring training are the diehard fans. So I think you're going to see a very warm reaction there. I think it's just going to be a lot of excitement for baseball to actually start, because, we can talk about how frustrated we are as fans at this entire process. But the reality of it is, the national eyes weren't going to be on baseball until opening day anyways, the eyes of the casual fan. So as long as that's preserved, I think that's number one win for MLB. That's where, and I think that the hardcore fans are going to appreciate having baseball on time. So I think that the casual fans are going to be there, if for no other reason than a curiosity. Hey, what was this entire lockout all about? I heard all about this. Let's see what baseball's up to. That kind of thing, checking in because of all the headlines.
Yeah.
And then the hardcore fans are just going to welcome it back with open arms because they are gonna be there no matter what.
Yeah, I think it's because it was so, man, you talk about just a roller coaster soap opera script,
Yep.
where you go from, oh boy, it's over. They're not going to play this year. They're going to miss half the season. If they miss half the season, they can miss the whole season. How hardline were they going to be? How much, were they willing to dip in, lose their licensing fees to pay players $15,000, a month or whatever they're paying to get, to cover the lost salaries, and the owners dealing with, not having players salaries on the payroll, but how they're going to keep the other employees going. It's like all that drama and all the high stakes, because there are, I will always be standing up for a lot of those workers that, are behind the scenes people, the people I see at stadiums, and I still, feel for the people in Jupiter and the ballpark at the Palm Beaches, because they're getting half of it. And
Right.
from what I understand, though, the schedule is probably going to get rewritten, and it's probably just going to be a lot of games against Marlins, Cardinals, Marlins, Nationals, Marlins, Astros, because they're there, and sprinkle in the Mets. I don't think you're going to see any trips beyond those two counties, and any. So I don't expect the Red Sox to come over here and play, or the Yankees or something like that, a spring training game. I wouldn't also be shocked if they did. I'm just speculating. I was going to ask somebody, but they're building the schedule now. If you see a ton of split squad games, because that would make a ton of sense. Also,
Yeah.
Just play the Mets. You play them in Port St. Lucie, and you play them, in Roger Dean Stadium. Just in the Donnie manages one team, and James Rousing goes and manages the split squad team, just to get more games for these players, more reps, and those backfields are going to be buzzing too, because players are going to have to get those at bats. Minor leaguers, to their credit, they're pretty tested. I think this helps. I asked JJ Bleday, just because they've been in there about 4 weeks already, and I said, ballpark figure, how many at bats do you think he got? He estimated maybe 30. A normal spring training, a player like a regular might get 80 to 100 at bats. So that's a good number of at bats to have before. I'm sure he'll be invited to big league camp. And meanwhile, he might come in the hottest guy in big league camp, because you don't know. Yeah, the guys were working out on their own and such, but it's a lot different when you're facing 96 from Cade Cavalli, compared to your mom and dad throwing batting practice to you up in Vermont or someplace.
Yeah, that's gonna be really interesting to me. I think you're going to see a good amount of major league invites, but I think you might see less than you have in recent years, just because teams want to get their guys ramped up. And so the minor league guys, like you said, they've been in camp for about a month already. They're getting the reps in. And so you don't really need to, the evaluation part for them has been ongoing. Yeah, so there's less that you need to see there, and more of like, we need to get our guys going. But you will see a few guys.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because normally in a normal spring training, Jack McKean used to like those final 10 days. He liked to know what his roster was and then run them out there, 7 to 9 innings, so they get ready to go into the season, ready to play full games, and there's continuity. Early part of spring is normally when you got those AA players that are up there getting the taste. The big leaguers are out of the game after 1 or 2 at bats. Now those big leaguers are going to have to, they may get 1 or 2 at bats on the main field, and then go in a minor league game, in the backfield there, to just get 2 or 3 more at bats, or they might be like Brian Anderson for instance, might play 2 innings or 3 innings to start it off, and then go get 3 at bats as a DH basically in a minor league game, which those games are all controlled. Those are controlled scrimmages. You can lead off the same inning. You can lead off, every inning over a 6-inning game. So in these things, because it's whatever you want to do. So you could get 6 at bats right there. And you might just keep the bat in your shoulder and track pitches just so you get the feel of seeing
Right.
pitching. So there's a lot that's going to go on. It's going to be interesting to see how these players, do, and let's hope that it doesn't come at a cost of a burnout and overdoing it and injury. And next thing you know, your years derail pretty fast.
Yeah.
So. Well, that's it. I don't want to carry this too long because
No,
we're going to do a lot
yeah.
more. So good stuff as always. Eric, get ready, buddy. Strap it in because we're going to be going pretty hard, pretty fast, and it's all good. Tell everyone where they can catch us and sign us out.
Absolutely. So you can be front row to all of this. You can follow us on Twitter at Man on Second. That's at Man on 2ND. And then you can catch all of our full length podcasts at the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. That's 5 Reasons YouTube channel for all of our full length podcasts. And it's going to be a lot more content as things ramp up here. Pleasure being on with you again, Joe.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Have a good one, everyone. See you.
All right.